Now let's look at the tones of Twi. So Twi makes use of 3 tones. We have the high tone, the mid tone, and then the low tone. Okay, so we have these 3 tones in Twi: the high tone, the mid tone, and then the low tone. The high tone is indicated by this diacritic, so this tone marker. So if you find this tone marker on a syllable, it shows that that particular syllable is pronounced with a high tone. And then we have the mid tone, and that is indicated by this diacritic. So this one is, flat, all right? So again, if you find this on top of a syllable, then it shows that that syllable is pronounced with a mid tone, all right? And then finally, we have the low tone, which is indicated by this tone marker. So it's like the opposite of the high tone marker. So the high tone marker goes up, and then the low tone marker comes down, and then the mid tone marker stays flat. But unfortunately, just like I mentioned in the introduction, we don't include these tone markers when we write in standard Twi. So in writing, you would have to rely more on the context to be able to tell the tone with which you should pronounce the syllables of a word, right? In speech, however, you pay attention to the tone with which, we pronounce the syllables of a word to be able to tell the meaning. So going back to the first set of examples that we used in the introduction, for the first one, we had papa, papa, papa. So I raised my pitch level on both syllables, and accordingly, I have, the high tone marker on both syllables. Now, for the hand fan, I bring the tone on both syllables down, so low, all right? So I say papa, pa, pa, papa. So again, I put the low tone marker on both syllables, right? So we have papa as against papa. For the last one, we had papa, pa, pa. So as you can hear, the tone on the first syllable is low, and then the tone on the last syllable is high. So I have the low tone marker on the first syllable, and then the high tone marker on the second syllable. So I say papa, papa, okay, papa, and that is father. I need to mention that for the example sets that we are using in this series, so the ones we've used so far and the ones that we are going to be using in the subsequent lessons, it would help if you could just memorize the tones that we are using on them, because they don't change. So for example, papa as good will always be papa with high tone on both syllables, all right? So as long as, you see this word and it means good, it will always be pronounced with high tone on both syllables. Likewise, papa as hand fan will always have a low tone on both syllables, okay? So they typically do not change when it comes to the tone, all right? So it would help and speed things up for you if you could just memorize the tones that we are using on the example sets, at least the ones that we are using in this series, so that by the end of the series, you would at least know how to pronounce the words that we used to exemplify what we are, saying. Now, before we end the lesson, please take note of this. While we have mentioned that Twi makes use of 3 tones, the high tone, the mid tone, and the low tone, you will find that the mid tone is rarely used, and there are reasons for that. But I'm not going to bore you with that. If you'd like to read more on that, as in why that is the case, you can check out the text version of this lesson on LEARNAKAN.com. So we have a text version of this on there that has, the reasons for that. I just had to mention this because you will find that for most of the examples that we are going to be using, and even the ones that we've used so far, we will mainly be using the high and the low tones, okay? So I just had to point that out so that there isn't a confusion as to why we are not using the mid-tone much. So now that we have all that out of the way, let's get into some popular word categories that we are able to distinguish between just by the tone with which we pronounce the words in those categories as against each other. Okay, so in our subsequent lessons, we are going to be looking at some very popular word categories that we are only able to distinguish between the words in those categories just by the tone with which we pronounce their syllables. And that essentially will be the whole point of this particular series. So I hope to catch you in the next one.